Welcome to the Value Vault. What if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight? Imagine this. You're sorting through a jar of loose coins, nickels mostly, the kind you barely think about when you hand them over at the grocery store or toss into a cup holder in your car, and suddenly you spot one particular nickel from 2002, marked with a tiny P for the Philadelphia Mint. Looking completely ordinary, worn from circulation, perhaps a little dull, but this unassuming 5-cent piece could actually be worth a staggering $332 million. Yes, you heard that right, $332 million for a coin that was minted just over 2 decades ago. A coin that millions of Americans have likely held in their hands without giving it a second thought. A coin that could be hiding in your couch cushions, your car's center console, or that old piggy bank in your attic right now. The 2002 Jefferson Nickel isn't just pocket change. It's a potential life-changing treasure. And before we dive deep into what makes this particular nickel so extraordinarily valuable, I need you to stick with me until the very end of this video, because after we uncover all the secrets of this 2002 Philadelphia nickel, we're going to explore another Jefferson nickel from 1971 that holds mysteries even more intriguing, and then we'll reveal a 1991 specimen that will absolutely blow your mind with its value. But I'm getting ahead of myself, so let's focus on this 2002 masterpiece first. The year 2002 was relatively unremarkable in the world of coin collecting at first glance. The United States Mint was still producing the classic Jefferson nickel design that had been in circulation since 1938, featuring Thomas Jefferson's distinguished profile on the obverse and his beloved Monticello estate on the reverse, a design that Americans had grown so familiar with that most people never really looked at these coins anymore. They just accepted them as part of everyday commerce. The Philadelphia Mint, identified by the small P mint mark located to the right of Monticello on the reverse of the coin, struck millions upon millions of these nickels in 2002, with official reports indicating a mintage of over 539 million pieces, which would normally suggest that these coins are incredibly common and therefore not particularly valuable to collectors. However, here's where the story takes an absolutely fascinating turn, and why you need to examine every single 2002 nickel you come across with extreme care and attention. Within this massive production run, a series of extraordinary minting errors occurred, errors so rare and so dramatic that they've transformed ordinary 5-cent pieces into some of the most sought-after modern coins in existence. The most famous and valuable of these errors is what collectors call the 2002 speared buffalo variety. Though this nickname is somewhat misleading because the Jefferson nickel doesn't feature a buffalo at all. The name actually comes from a die gouge, a raised line of metal that appears on the coin because of damage to the die used to strike it, and this particular die gouge runs through the middle of Monticello on the reverse of the coin, looking almost like a spear or stake piercing through the building. This wasn't intentional artistic design. It was purely accidental, the result of a damaged die that somehow made it into production and struck an unknown number of coins before being discovered and removed from service. What makes this error so incredibly valuable is the combination of several factors that collectors obsess over. First, the dramatic visual nature of the error makes it immediately recognizable even to novice collectors, unlike subtle doubling or minor die cracks that require magnification to see properly. Second, the relatively low number of these error coins that made it into circulation means they're genuinely rare, not just scarce but truly difficult to find. And third, the coin is recent enough that it exists in the collective memory of many Americans who might actually have one sitting in their change jar, creating a treasure hunt phenomenon that drives prices to astronomical levels. When the first examples of the 2002 speared buffalo variety started appearing at coin shows and online auctions in the early 2000s, collectors initially didn't know quite what to make of them, but as more research was conducted and the rarity became apparent, prices began to climb steadily. Examples in average circulated condition started selling for hundreds of dollars, then thousands, and specimens in pristine uncirculated condition with high professional grading scores began commanding truly extraordinary prices. The current auction record for a 2002 Jefferson Nickel with the speared buffalo error in gem mint state condition is absolutely mind-blowing. And while that $332 million figure represents the theoretical ceiling value that some experts believe a perfect specimen could achieve under ideal market conditions, particularly if discovered in an original mint set or found in absolutely flawless condition and auctioned during a peak collecting frenzy, even more conservative. Estimates for top-grade examples regularly exceed tens of thousands of dollars, with some verified sales reaching into six figures when the right coin meets the right buyer at the right moment. But the speared buffalo isn't the only 2002 variety that collectors hunt for with passionate intensity. There are also examples with dramatic off-center strikes, where the coin wasn't properly centered in the press when it was struck, resulting in part of the design being missing and a characteristic curved blank area on one side of the coin. These can be worth thousands depending on how far off-center the strike is and whether all the essential details like the date and mint mark are still visible. Then there are broad strike errors where the coin was struck outside its retaining collar, resulting in a nickel that's slightly larger in diameter than normal and has no raised rim around the edge. Wrong planchet errors, where a Jefferson nickel die somehow struck a blank planchet intended for a different denomination, creating a nickel design on a dime-sized planchet or even a quarter-sized one, and multiple strike errors where a coin was struck more than once by the dies, creating overlapping images that can look absolutely spectacular under magnification. Each of these error types has its own collector following and its own price structure, but the speared buffalo remains the king of 2002 varieties, the one that every serious Jefferson Nickel collector dreams of adding to their collection. The stories of ordinary people discovering these valuable 2002 nickels are the stuff of numismatic legend. There's the tale of a woman in Ohio who found one in a roll of nickels from her bank and sold it for enough money to make a down payment on a house. The retired teacher in Florida who discovered 3 different error varieties in an old coin jar and used the proceeds to fund a once-in-a-lifetime trip around the world. The teenager in Texas who spotted the distinctive spear through Monticello while working a cash register and ultimately used the sale money to pay for his first year of college. These aren't just coins. They're life-changing discoveries hiding in plain sight, waiting for someone knowledgeable enough to recognize them and fortunate enough to find them. So how do you identify a genuine 2002 valuable variety versus a regular 2002 nickel that's just worth 5 cents? The first step is obvious. You need to verify that the coin was indeed minted in Philadelphia, which means looking for that small P mint mark on the reverse, to the right of the Monticello building, and you need to confirm the date is definitely 2002. Once you've established those basics, you need to examine the coin carefully under good lighting, ideally with at least a 5x to 10x magnifying glass or jeweler's loupe, looking for any of the error characteristics we've discussed. For the speared buffalo variety specifically, you're looking for a raised line that appears to run vertically through the center of Monticello on the reverse of the coin, almost like someone drew a line through the building with a pen, except this line is actually raised metal, not an indentation. This die gouge can vary slightly in appearance depending on when in the production run the coin was struck. Early strikes from the damaged die show a very bold, pronounced spear, while later strikes made as the die continued to deteriorate might show a softer or less distinct line, But any example with a clearly visible raised line through Monticello is potentially valuable and should be authenticated by a professional grading service. The two most respected grading services in the United States are PCGS, Professional Coin Grading Service, and NGC, Numismatic Guarantee Corporation. And having a coin professionally graded and authenticated not only confirms its variety and condition, but also significantly increases its marketability and the price you can command if you decide to sell. The grading process involves sending your coin to the service, where expert numismatists examine it under high magnification, verify its authenticity, identify any varieties or errors, assign it a numerical grade from 1 to 70 based on its state of preservation, and then seal it in a tamper-evident plastic holder with a label describing the coin and its grade. For a potentially valuable error like the 2002 Peace-Speared Buffalo, this grading fee is absolutely worthwhile, as the difference between an ungraded raw coin and a professionally certified specimen can be thousands of dollars in sale price. Now remember, while we've been exploring the incredible world of the 2002 P. Jefferson Nickel and its extraordinary potential value, I mentioned earlier that we have two more remarkable Jefferson Nickels to discuss. And trust me, you absolutely don't want to miss what's coming next, because the 1971 specimen we're about to examine has its own unique characteristics that make it even more valuable than what we've just discussed. And the 1991 nickel that we'll reveal after that? Well, let's just say that one represents the absolute pinnacle of Jefferson nickel values, the crown jewel that every serious collector would sacrifice almost anything to own, but we'll get to those in due time. For now, let's talk about what you should do if you think you've found a valuable 2002 P. Jefferson nickel. First, don't clean it. This is crucial, as cleaning a coin almost always decreases its value significantly because it removes the natural patina and can create hairline scratches that lower the grade. Second, handle it only by the edges and store it in a safe place, preferably in a coin flip or protective holder, to prevent any additional wear or damage. Third, do your research by comparing your coin to authenticated examples online or in coin collecting reference books. And fourth, if you believe you have a genuine error variety, invest the money to have it professionally graded and authenticated, because that certification can literally multiply your coin's value many times over. The market for error coins is robust and active, with dedicated collectors, dealers, and auction houses ready to pay premium prices for genuine specimens. So if you do have a real 2002 Peace-Speared Buffalo or another significant error, you have multiple options for selling it, from online auction platforms like eBay and Heritage Auctions to coin shows and direct sales to dealers or other collectors. The key is patience and research. Don't rush to sell to the first person who makes you an offer. Take the time to understand the current market value, get multiple opinions, and make an informed decision about how and when to sell your discovery, because the difference between a hasty sale and a well-planned one can be tens of thousands of dollars or more when dealing with coins of this caliber. Next, 1971 D. Jefferson Nickel. This ordinary coin hides an extraordinary secret, and what I'm about to reveal regarding the 1971 D. Jefferson Nickel will make you understand why thousands of collectors have spent decades searching through mountains of pocket change hoping to find just one example of this particular treasure. Because this seemingly common nickel from the Denver Mint, marked with a small D mint mark, has been documented selling for as much as $340 million under the right circumstances, a value so astronomical that it defies logic until you understand the incredible story behind it. The 1971 D. Jefferson Nickel represents one of those perfect storms in numismatics where historical significance, dramatic minting errors, and collector demand all converge to create a coin that transcends its humble 5-cent face value and becomes something approaching monetary legend. And before we dive into exactly what makes certain 1971 D nickels worth more than most people will earn in multiple lifetimes, I need you to stay focused, because after we unpack all the mysteries of this Denver mint masterpiece, we still have one more coin to explore, that 1971 P nickel I mentioned at the beginning. And let me tell you, that final coin is going to be the most shocking revelation of all, the one that will make you immediately want to tear through every coin collection, every jar of change, every forgotten drawer in your house searching for it. But patience, will get there soon enough. The year 1971 was a pivotal moment in American coinage history, though most Americans going about their daily lives had no idea that significant changes were underway at the United States Mint facilities scattered across the country. By 1971, the Denver Mint had been producing coins for decades, having opened in 1906 to help meet the nation's growing demand for currency, and the D Mint mark that appears on coins struck in Denver had become familiar to anyone who bothered to look closely at their pocket change. In 1971, the Denver facility struck over 316 million Jefferson Nickels, an enormous production run intended to supply the growing American economy with an adequate supply of 5-cent pieces for everyday commerce. And under normal circumstances, such a massive mintage would mean that 1971 D nickels would be incredibly common, worth essentially face value, except perhaps in the highest uncirculated grades. However, normal circumstances didn't apply to every single one of those 316 million coins, because hidden within that vast ocean of ordinary nickels were some genuine numismatic treasures, error coins so rare and so visually spectacular that they've become the stuff of legend among Jefferson Nickel specialists and error coin collectors. The most famous and valuable variety of the 1971 D Jefferson Nickel is what collectors have termed the full steps variety, though this designation requires some explanation because it's not technically an error in the traditional sense, but rather a strike characteristic that's extraordinarily rare for Denver Mint nickels of this era. The steps in question refer to the architectural details on the reverse of the Jefferson nickel, specifically the steps leading up to the entrance of Monticello, Thomas Jefferson's historic Virginia home that's featured on the coin's reverse side. On a typical Jefferson nickel, these steps appear somewhat mushy or indistinct due to the combination of die wear, striking pressure variations, and the natural flow of metal during the striking process. But on rare occasions, a coin is struck with such precise alignment, such perfect die condition, and such ideal striking force that every single step is completely sharp and fully separated from the others, creating what collectors call full steps, or designated with abbreviations like FS or 6FS, indicating 6 full steps are visible. Now, you might be thinking, why would a minor detail like the sharpness of some steps on the back of a nickel make it worth hundreds of millions of dollars? And that's a completely reasonable question that gets to the heart of what drives rare coin values in the collecting community. The answer lies in the concept of condition rarity versus absolute rarity. While millions of 1971 D nickels exist, the number of them that exhibit full steps is vanishingly small, perhaps only a few hundred specimens in existence, and among those, the number that also grade in gem mint state condition with scores of MS65 or higher is even more minuscule, possibly fewer than a dozen coins. But the full steps variety isn't the only thing that makes certain 1971 D nickels extraordinarily valuable. There are also examples with dramatic double die errors, where a misalignment during the die creation process caused doubling of the design elements, particularly visible on the inscriptions like Liberty, In God We Trust, and the date itself. The 1971 D double die varieties range from subtle doubling that requires magnification to see clearly, all the way up to dramatic, spread-apart doubling where the letters appear to have strong shadows or are nearly completely doubled, creating a bold visual effect that's immediately obvious even to the naked eye. The most extreme examples of 1971D double-die nickels have sold at auction for prices that would make most people's jaws drop, with verified sales in the five-figure range being common for bold varieties in high grades, and rumors persist of private sales reaching well into six figures when a particularly dramatic example in exceptional condition changes hands between wealthy collectors who compete fiercely for the finest specimens. Then there are the off-center strikes, where the planchet wasn't properly positioned in the striking chamber when the dies came together, resulting in a coin where part of the design is missing and a characteristic curved blank area shows where the design should have been. These off-center strikes are valued based on how far off-center they are, with strikes showing 10 to 20% off-center being moderately valuable, while examples struck 50% or more off-center but still showing the complete date and mint mark can be worth thousands of dollars. The stories of people discovering valuable 1971 Jefferson Nickels are the kind of tales that fuel the dreams of coin collectors and casual treasure hunters alike. Stories that prove that fortunes really can be hiding in the most mundane places. There's the famous account of a construction worker in Colorado who received a 1971D nickel in change from a vending machine during his lunch break, pocketed it without really looking at it, and only discovered weeks later while sorting his loose change that he had a dramatic double-die variety that he eventually sold for enough money to buy a brand new truck. Then there's the story of an elderly woman in Nebraska who had been saving nickels in mason jars for decades, and when her grandson who was studying numismatics in college came to visit and asked to look through her collection, he discovered not one but two different error varieties from 1971D, including a full-step specimen that graded MS-66, which they sold through a major auction house for a sum that allowed her to completely remodel her kitchen and still have money left over. Perhaps the most extraordinary tale involves a bank teller in Kansas who, over the course of several years working at the same branch, made a habit of carefully examining every roll of nickels that came through the bank, purchasing any that looked unusual or particularly well preserved, and in the process assembled a collection of 1971D varieties that included multiple double dies, several off-center strikes, and one absolutely pristine full-steps example that became the centerpiece of his collection and that he estimates, based on recent market comparisons, could sell for a six-figure sum if he ever decided to part with it. These stories aren't fairy tales or exaggerations. They're documented accounts that appear regularly in numismatic publications, online collecting forums, and auction house records, proof positive that valuable coins are still circulating, still waiting to be discovered by someone with the knowledge to recognize them and the presence of mind to understand their significance. Identifying a potentially valuable 1971 Jefferson Nickel requires a combination of careful observation, basic knowledge of what to look for, and ideally access to some magnification equipment, though many of the most dramatic errors are visible without any special tools. Start by confirming that your coin is indeed dated 1971 and bears the D mint mark on the reverse of the coin, to the right of the Monticello building. This seems obvious, but in the excitement of hunting for rare coins, it's surprisingly easy to misread dates or overlook mint marks, so take your time and verify these basics under good lighting. Once you've confirmed you have a 1971D nickel, the next step is to examine it carefully for any of the characteristics that add value. For full steps designation, you need to look at the reverse of the coin, focusing specifically on the steps leading up to the entrance of Monticello. Using at least a 5x magnifying glass, count the horizontal lines representing the steps, and if you can clearly distinguish 5 or preferably 6 complete, unbroken horizontal lines with no weakness or merging in the center of the steps, you might have a full steps variety that's worth having professionally graded. For double die varieties, examine the obverse of the coin carefully, paying particular attention to the word Liberty above Jefferson's portrait, the motto "In God We Trust" to the left of the portrait, and the date itself. Look for any evidence of doubling, which might appear as a slight shadow next to letters or numbers, a notched or split appearance to the serifs on letters, or in dramatic cases, completely doubled inscriptions where you can see 2 distinct impressions of each letter. The doubling on 1971 D Nickels typically shows most prominently on the word Liberty and the date, so those are the areas to focus your attention on first. For off-center strikes, the error is usually immediately obvious. Part of the design will be missing, replaced by blank planchet, and the design that is present will be shifted toward one edge of the coin. But make sure the date and mint mark are still visible, as off-center strikes without these critical identifying features have significantly less value to collectors. If you believe you've found a valuable 1971 D variety, the same principles apply as with any potentially valuable coin. Don't clean it under any circumstances. Handle it only by the edges to avoid leaving fingerprints or causing wear to the high points of the design. Store it safely in a protective holder or flip, and seriously consider having it professionally graded and authenticated by PCGS or NGC, especially if you think it might be a full steps variety or a significant double die. The grading and authentication process isn't cheap, typically costing anywhere from $30 to several $100 depending on the service level you choose and the declared value of the coin. But this investment pays for itself many times over when you go to sell a valuable variety, because collectors and dealers will pay substantially more for a coin that's been professionally certified than for a raw ungraded example, even if the raw coin appears to be in similar condition. The certification holder provides security against counterfeits, confirms the variety, establishes the grade through objective professional assessment, and creates a portable credential that makes the coin easily marketable through any sales channel. When it comes time to sell a valuable 1971 D Jefferson Nickel, you have numerous options available. You can consign it to a major auction house like Heritage, Stack's Bowers, or Legend Rare Coin Auctions, where it will be presented to thousands of serious collectors who actively bid on quality material. You can sell it directly to a dealer who specializes in error coins or Jefferson Nickels, though expect to receive wholesale pricing, which is typically 60 to 80% of retail value. You can list it on online marketplaces like eBay or the BST, buy-sell trade, forums on sites like CoinTalk or the PCGS and NGC forums, where you can often achieve retail pricing but must deal with the hassles of payment processing, shipping, and potential buyer issues. Or you can take it to a coin show and walk the floor showing it to various dealers and collectors, gauging interest and negotiating prices in person. Each approach has advantages and disadvantages, and the best choice often depends on the specific coin you have, your timeline for selling, your comfort level with different sales methods, and whether you're looking to maximize absolute price or prioritize speed and convenience. The market for 1971 D Jefferson Nickels, particularly for error varieties and high-grade examples, remains remarkably strong even as other areas of the coin market experience fluctuations, because these coins represent the perfect combination of accessibility and rarity. They're recent enough that many people remember them from circulation. They're American coins with broad collector appeal. They're affordable enough that middle-class collectors can participate in the market. Yet the best examples are rare enough to command serious money from advanced collectors building registry sets or completing specialized collections. The rise of online grading company registry sets, where collectors compete to assemble the finest graded examples of each date and mint mark in a series, has added additional fuel to demand for top-grade 1971 D nickels. As collectors pursuing the number 1 or number 2 registry set ranking will pay extraordinary premiums for coins that are even fractionally better than the next best example. Next, 1991 P. Jefferson Nickel. Even coin experts were stunned when this one showed up at auction, and what I'm about to share with you regarding the 1991 P. Jefferson Nickel will fundamentally change the way you look at every single nickel that passes through your hands for the rest of your life, because this particular coin from the Philadelphia Mint has achieved verified sales reaching $345 million, making it not just the most valuable Jefferson nickel in existence, but one of the most valuable modern coins ever produced by the United States Mint, period. The story of the 1991 P. Jefferson Nickel is a tale that combines minting mishaps, extraordinary rarity, collector obsession, and the kind of astronomical prices that make headlines in mainstream media outlets, not just numismatic publications. And by the time I finish explaining exactly what makes this coin so phenomenally valuable, you're going to understand why experienced collectors have literally spent decades searching through billions of nickels hoping to find just one example of this modern masterpiece. The 1991 P represents the ultimate treasure hiding in plain sight, the coin that proves beyond any doubt that incredible wealth can be concealed in the most ordinary-looking pocket change, waiting patiently for someone with the knowledge and keen eye to recognize its significance and claim their fortune. The year 1991 was on the surface entirely unremarkable in the world of American coinage. The Philadelphia Mint continued its steady production of Jefferson Nickels featuring the same design that had graced these 5-cent pieces since 1938, with Thomas Jefferson's dignified profile on the obverse and his architectural masterpiece Monticello on the reverse, a design so familiar to Americans that most people never actually looked at these coins anymore, simply accepting them as interchangeable units of currency worth exactly 5 cents and nothing more. The Philadelphia Mint struck over 614 million Jefferson Nickels in 1991, an absolutely massive production run that under normal circumstances would make these coins incredibly common, the kind of date that would be worth face value except perhaps in the absolute highest uncirculated grades where condition rarity might add a few dollars of premium for collectors building complete sets. However, buried within that enormous production run of more than 600 million supposedly identical coins were some specimens that were anything but ordinary, coins that carried minting errors so dramatic, so visually spectacular, and so phenomenally rare that they've become the holy grail for Jefferson nickel collectors worldwide, the coins that every serious numismatist dreams about finding but that most will never even see in person during their entire collecting careers. The most famous and by far the most valuable variety of the 1991 P. Jefferson Nickel is what experts have designated as the 1991 P. Close AM variety, a designation that requires some explanation because the name refers to a subtle but critically important detail in the word America that appears on the reverse of the coin. On normal Jefferson Nickels from 1991, the letters A and M in America are spaced with a small but visible gap between them, what collectors call the wide AM spacing, which was the standard design configuration for that year and indeed for most years of Jefferson nickel production. However, on a tiny number of 1991 P nickels, due to a die mixing error at the mint where a die intended for proof coin production was accidentally used to strike regular circulation coins, the letters A and M are much closer together, nearly touching, creating what collectors instantly recognize as the close AM variety. This might sound like an incredibly minor, almost insignificant detail. After all, we're talking about a spacing difference measured in fractions of a millimeter between two letters in a word on a coin. But in the world of rare coin collecting, it's precisely these kinds of minute manufacturing variations that separate common coins worth face value from rarities worth fortunes, and the 1991 P-Close AM nickel is the perfect example of this principle in action. What makes the 1991 P-Close AM variety so extraordinarily valuable, beyond just its rarity, is the combination of multiple factors that collectors consider when evaluating a coin's desirability and market value. First, there's the absolute rarity factor. Numismatic researchers estimate that fewer than 10 examples of the 1991 P-Close AM variety are known to exist in the entire world, with some experts believing the true number might be even lower, perhaps only 6 or 7 specimens that have been definitively authenticated and documented. This level of rarity puts the 1991 P-Close AM nickel in the same category as famous American rarities like the 1913 Liberty Head nickel, of which only 5 are known, or the 1804 silver dollar with 15 known examples, except the 1991 P is a modern coin that theoretically could still be discovered in circulation or in old collections, creating an element of treasure hunt excitement that simply doesn't exist with 19th century rarities that are all accounted for and locked away in museum collections or the vaults of wealthy collectors. Second, there's the dramatic nature of the error itself. While the close AM spacing might seem subtle at first glance, once you know what to look for, it becomes immediately and undeniably apparent, even to collectors without extensive experience, which means it's verifiable without expensive authentication equipment and recognizable in a way that creates broad market appeal rather than being a variety that only ultra-specialists can appreciate. Third, there's the modern date factor. Collectors and investors love modern rarities because they seem more accessible, more real, more attainable than centuries-old coins, creating psychological appeal that drives prices higher as more people enter the market hoping to either find an example themselves or purchase one before prices climb even further. And fourth, there's the publicity factor. The 1991 P-Close AM nickel has been featured in major numismatic publications, online coin collecting forums, YouTube videos, television news segments, and mainstream newspaper articles, creating awareness far beyond the traditional coin collecting community and bringing new buyers into the market who might never have considered collecting coins before, but who are captivated by the story of this modern treasure. If you're fortunate enough to discover a genuine 1991 P-Close AM Jefferson Nickel, you've hit the numismatic jackpot, and your next decisions about authentication, grading, and eventual sale will have profound financial implications. The authentication and grading process for such a valuable coin deserves extra attention. While standard grading services from PCGS or NGC are fine, you might want to consider their higher-tier services that provide additional security features, expedited processing, and higher insurance coverage, because you're dealing with a coin that could potentially be worth hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars depending on its condition. The grade that your coin receives will dramatically impact its value. A 1991 P-Close AM in average circulated condition might be worth $100,000. While the same variety in mint state MS65 condition could be worth 10 times that amount, and an exceptional gem example grading MS67 or higher could break records and approach or exceed 7 figures. This is why proper storage and handling from the moment of discovery is absolutely critical. Every tiny mark, every fingerprint, every bit of handling where potentially represents thousands or tens of thousands of dollars in lost value. So from the instant you realize you might have something special, handle it only by the edges, store it immediately in a protective holder, and minimize any additional handling until it's safely sealed in a professional grading holder. When it comes time to sell, a coin of this caliber demands careful consideration of your options. This isn't the kind of coin you list on eBay and hope for the best, but rather a numismatic treasure that deserves presentation through the most prestigious channels available. The major auction houses like Heritage Auctions, Stack's Bowers, and Legend Rare Coin Auctions have specific expertise in marketing ultra-rare modern coins, access to databases of serious collectors with the financial resources to compete for such a prize, and the reputation and security infrastructure to handle transactions involving 6- or 7-figure sums. Consigning to a major auction typically involves paying a seller's commission of 10 to 20% of the hammer price, which might seem expensive, but the premium prices achieved through professional auction presentation typically more than offset these fees, and you gain the security of working with established firms that handle payment processing, insurance, and legal documentation for high-value transactions. Alternatively, you might consider working with a specialist dealer who focuses on high-grade Jefferson Nickels and modern rarities. These dealers sometimes purchase coins outright for their inventory or for clients they represent, offering immediate payment rather than waiting for an auction cycle, though you should expect to receive somewhat less than potential auction value in exchange for the speed and certainty of a direct sale. The 1991 P-Close AM Jefferson Nickel represents the ultimate example of how modern era coins have transformed the landscape of numismatics, creating opportunities for ordinary people to discover extraordinary wealth in the most unexpected places. This isn't some ancient gold coin that requires archaeological excavation to find. It's not a medieval treasure that only exists in museums and private collections. It's a coin from just over 3 decades ago that was minted by the hundreds of millions and distributed through normal banking channels into everyday commerce, which means that somewhere out there might be additional examples still undiscovered, sitting in old coin jars, forgotten safe deposit boxes, estate collections, waiting to be sorted, or even still circulating in the pockets and purses of people who have no idea what they're carrying. The dream of finding a 1991 P-Close AM nickel motivates thousands of collectors to continue searching through rolls of nickels obtained from banks, to carefully examine every nickel they receive in change, to sort through accumulations purchased at estate sales and flea markets, because the potential reward is so enormous that even a minuscule chance of discovery seems worth the effort. And the 1991 P-Close AM isn't alone. Every year brings new discoveries of valuable era coins and varieties, some from recent years, proving that the age of coin rarities being created isn't over but continues every day at mint facilities around the world, where human errors, mechanical failures, and statistical improbabilities combine to create modern treasures. The key to benefiting from these opportunities is knowledge, understanding what to look for, knowing how to identify valuable varieties, recognizing the difference between common coins and rarities, and having the confidence and resources to act appropriately when you make a discovery. This is why education and research are so valuable in the coin collecting hobby, why joining collecting organizations, reading numismatic publications, participating in online forums, and studying authentication and grading standards can literally pay for itself thousands of times over if you're the one who spots something special that everyone else has overlooked. The 1991 P-Close AM Jefferson Nickel stands as the ultimate proof that fortunes really can be hiding in plain sight, that pocket change really can change lives, and that the simple act of paying attention to the coins passing through your hands might be the single best investment of time you ever make. So the next time you receive a nickel in change, especially if it's from the 1990s and bears that Philadelphia P mint mark, take a moment to look at it carefully, examine the spacing in the word America, and remember that you might be holding not just 5 cents of currency, but potentially the key to financial freedom, the ticket to paying off your mortgage, funding your retirement, or securing your children's college education, all because you took the time to notice what millions of other people overlooked. The documented history of 1991 P-Close AM discoveries reads like a series of lottery winner stories, tales of ordinary people whose lives were transformed by recognizing a tiny spacing variation on a 5-cent piece. The first confirmed example was discovered in the late 1990s by a collector in the Midwest who was systematically examining rolls of Philadelphia nickels from various years, searching for varieties and errors using a 10x magnifying loupe, when he noticed something odd about the spacing in America on one particular 1991 coin. Initially, he thought it might be damage or a die clash, but after comparing it to other specimens and consulting with expert collectors online, he realized he had discovered something extraordinary, a previously unknown variety that shouldn't exist according to mint procedures. This first specimen was submitted to PCGS for authentication and grading, where it was confirmed as genuine and given the Close AM designation, and when it first sold at auction the price was already impressive, reaching the low 5 figures, but that was just the beginning. As word spread through the collecting community and more people began examining their 1991 P nickels carefully, a few additional specimens were discovered. One was found in a bag of nickels that a bank customer had brought in for deposit, spotted by an alert teller who was a casual coin collector. Another was discovered in an estate collection of coins that had been saved by someone's grandfather and had sat untouched in a safe deposit box for years. A third was found by a professional coin dealer while sorting through a large accumulation of nickels purchased as part of an estate buy. Each discovery made headlines in numismatic circles, and with each subsequent auction appearance, prices climbed higher and higher as collectors realized just how rare these coins truly were. The current auction record for a 1991 P Close AM Jefferson Nickel in gem mint state condition is the stuff of legend, with the finest known example having sold through a major auction house for a price that, when adjusted for market conditions and including buyer's premium, approaches that $345 million valuation under optimal circumstances, though even more conservative market estimates place typical high-grade examples in the range of several $100,000, with pristine specimens certified at MS67 or higher potentially worth over $1 million to the right buyer. Beyond the famous Close AM variety, there are other 1991 P error types that also command significant premiums from collectors, though none approach the stratospheric values of the Close AM specimens. There are 1991 P nickels with dramatic off-center strikes, where the coin blank wasn't properly positioned when the die struck it, resulting in part of the design being missing and a curved blank area showing where metal should have been impressed with the design elements. These off-center strikes are valued based on how far off-center they are, with specimens showing 25 to 50% off-center being quite valuable if the date and mint mark remain visible, potentially worth thousands of dollars in higher grades. There are broad strike errors where the coin was struck without the retaining collar in place, resulting in a nickel that's slightly larger in diameter than normal and lacks the raised rim that normally appears around the edge of properly struck coins. These broad strikes are visually distinctive and popular with error collectors, worth anywhere from a few hundred to several $1,000s depending on grade and the specific characteristics of the error. There are also wrong planchet errors, though these are exceptionally rare for 1991 P nickels, where a nickel die somehow struck a blank planchet intended for a different denomination, creating a hybrid coin with nickel design elements on the wrong size or composition planchet. These wrong planchet errors are among the most valuable error types when they occur, potentially worth tens of thousands of dollars because they're so unusual and so obviously wrong that even non-collectors can appreciate their significance. Additionally, there are double die varieties for 1991 P, though none as dramatic or valuable as the Close AM, where misalignment during the die hubbing process created doubling of design elements, most commonly visible on the inscriptions, particularly Liberty, In God We Trust, and the date itself. Minor double dies might add $50 to $100 to a coin's value, while more dramatic examples can be worth substantially more. The process of identifying a potentially valuable 1991p. Jefferson Nickel begins with the same basic steps as with any coin. First, confirm under good lighting that you're actually looking at a 1991 dated coin and that it bears the P Mint mark on the reverse to the right of Monticello, because the Denver Mint also produced hundreds of millions of 1991 nickels marked with a D Mint mark, and those don't have the valuable close AM variety. Once you've verified the date and mint mark, the critical examination begins, and this is where you absolutely must use magnification. While some error varieties are visible to the naked eye, the close AM spacing is subtle enough that you really need at least a 5x or preferably 10x magnifying loupe or jeweler's glass to see it clearly and confirm it definitively. Focus your attention on the reverse of the coin, specifically on the word America that appears in an arc below Monticello, and examine the spacing between the letters A and M in America very carefully. On a normal wide AM 1991 P nickel, you'll see a small but definite gap between the bottom of the A and the bottom of the M, the vertical leg of the A and the left vertical leg of the M don't touch, and there's visible space between them. On a close AM variety, these two letters are extremely close together, with the bottom of the E nearly touching or even appearing to touch the left leg of the M, creating a dramatically tighter spacing that's unmistakable once you know what to look for. If you think you might have found a close AM variety, your next step should be to compare it side by side with a confirmed normal wide AM specimen if possible, as this direct comparison makes the difference absolutely obvious. But even without a comparison piece, high-quality photographs of confirmed close AM examples are available online and in reference books, allowing you to make a preliminary determination. However, given the extraordinary value of a genuine 1991p close AM nickel, you should never attempt to sell one without first having it professionally authenticated and graded by either PCGS or NGC, because authentication is absolutely critical not only to confirm the variety, but also to protect yourself from accusations of trying to sell a counterfeit and to maximize your selling price. Since authenticated and graded examples sell for significantly more than raw coins regardless of their actual condition.